Hey everybody, hope everybody is doing well and is staying healthy and sane during this pseudo quarantine we're going through. Studying the endocrine system like I know a lot of folks are. This is always an area that gave me a little bit of trouble in A&P2. It just seems to be very confusing, lots of concepts. So I drew up a very simple flowchart that has helped me keep these hormones and processes straight, and I hope it helps somebody out there as well. So real quick, just going to start with the hypothalamus. And even though the pituitary gland is really known as the master gland, it's the hypothalamus that is sort of the conductor in this whole symphony. And it works in a couple of ways by exerting action on the pituitary gland, which is divided into an anterior pituitary portion and a posterior pituitary portion, the adenohypophysis and the neurohypophysis respectively. We're going to focus real quick though on the anterior pituitary. The hypothalamus secretes releasing hormones that act on the anterior pituitary. Those are GnRH, TRH, and CRH. And these act on the anterior pituitary and spur the production of these other hormones, which are known as tropic hormones. And tropic hormones are hormones that act on other glands to spur them to make hormones of their own. And I know these by the acronym FLAT, F-L-A-T. We have FSH, which is made when the hypothalamus secretes GnRH or gonadotropic releasing hormone. FSH is made, it acts on the gonads, the ovaries and testes, and in the ovaries it spurs the production of eggs, and in the testes it stimulates the production of sperm. GnRH also promotes the production in the anterior pituitary of LH, or luteinizing hormone, which also acts on the gonads, the ovaries and testes, to promote ovulation and testosterone production, respectively. Then we have ACTH. ACTH is made by the anterior pituitary when the hypothalamus secretes the releasing hormone CRH. ACTH acts on the adrenal cortex to release cortisol. And then finally, the releasing hormone TRH acts on the anterior pituitary to produce TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone, which acts on the thyroid and causes the thyroid to make T3 and T4. So those are our tropic hormones of the anterior pituitary, and we know them as FLAT. The anterior pituitary also makes non-tropic hormones, MSH, prolactin, and growth hormone. I know these by the acronym MPG. Prolactin acts on the female breast to sustain lactation, and growth hormone acts on most of the cells in the body in a variety of different ways. And prolactin and growth hormone arguably do have tropic features in their function, but we'll consider them non-tropic for our discussion. So now let's talk about the posterior pituitary, or the neurohypophysis. Now this part of the gland does not make any hormones of its own. It stores oxytocin and ADH, which are made in the hypothalamus. So it stores these two hormones. Oxytocin acts on the uterus and the female breasts to stimulate uterine contraction and milk secretion. And then ADH, we all know what that is, antidiuretic hormone, acts on the kidneys to increase water reabsorption in the DCT and collecting duct when the baroreceptors and chemoreceptors, et cetera, realize that blood volume is low. It will do this in order to raise the blood pressure. And those receptors talk to the hypothalamus, which then sends nerve impulses to the posterior pituitary, which then releases these hormones. Meanwhile, the hormones of the anterior pituitary are typically released, these tropic hormones are typically released as a result of a negative feedback loop. For example, let's talk about TSH. Let's say that the hypothalamus detects that the levels of T3 and T4 are low in the blood. It will then release TRH, the releasing hormone, which will act on the anterior pituitary, which will then make TSH, which will act on the thyroid to make T3 and T4. So that is a very, very brief overview of the endocrine system and some of its associated hormones. I hope this is helpful to somebody, and happy studying.